All right, welcome in Merc Nation to the Merc Method podcast today. I'm greatly appreciative of you being here. Today isn't about weakness. It's about strength. It's about courage. It's about the reality that some of the strongest men that we know are carrying things nobody knows about. Since it's Men's Mental Health Month, we're going to have a conversation that matters. No judgment, no pretending, no pressure to have all the answers. Just an honest reminder that every man deserves a safe place to say what's really on his mind. Welcome to Check In, brother. Like I always say, I really appreciate you spending time with me today and listening to this episode because it is really important to me. Being a male too, and struggling with mental health for a good portion of my life. This hits home, and understanding that men are very bad at sharing their feelings, but we're gradually trying to break that cycle because we're talking about something that affects millions of men every single day, yet somehow it doesn't get discussed nearly enough. Now, before anybody starts thinking this is going to be a heavy, depressing conversation, I'm going to stop you right there, okay? That's not what today is going to be about. Today is about hope and about growth and about understanding that life gets heavy sometimes, but we don't have to carry that weight alone. And honestly, that's where this episode started for me. I started to think about all the men that I know in my life, my friends, my family members, coworkers, people in my community, people I grew up with, strong men, people that work hard every single day, men who would do absolutely anything for the people they loved, anything for their family. I'm included. I would do anything for my family. And then I started asking myself this question: who checks on them? Who asks them how they're really doing? Not how work is going, not how the game was, not how the kids are doing, but how are you doing? I'm calling you out for you listening. How are you doing? Really? To be honest, most men have become masters at saying two words: I'm fine. I know you've heard it 1,000 times over, but we do say it way too much. It's probably the most common answer you'll hear from a man. How are you doing? I'm fine. Everything good? I'm fine. You doing okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Meanwhile, they're carrying all this stress, carrying pressure, disappointment, fears about the future. They're carrying responsibilities that nobody else even sees because we don't like to share these emotions. Yet somehow we're convinced that we have to keep smiling and keep moving. And that's what I want to talk about today. Not because men are weak and not because they're broken, but because men are human and every human needs support. Every human being needs connection. Every human being needs someone they can talk to and feel comfortable with. So, for this episode, we're going to have a real conversation. Like I said, no judgment, no pretending. And again, no having pressure to have all the answers. Just a reminder that checking in isn't weak, it's wisdom. And if you're listening right now, I hope one thing becomes clear before I'm done with this episode. You, the listener, I'm talking to you, you matter too. Your mental health matters, your well-being matters. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply be honest about where you are. Okay? So let's get into this. So I'm going to get on a personal level for a second. For me, when I was growing up, nobody really asked me how I was doing on a level where I would share with them how I was doing mentally because I was not good. From having one of my cousins pass away early on in my young life, when I was 15, and then having a core piece of my family with my grandmother passing away, nobody really checked in enough to where we had, we're not going to therapy and everything else. So I just kind of shoved all of those feelings aside for a very long time. And especially with my cousin who drowned, I hated water. And I hated water because of that reason, because I didn't know how to open up and talk to somebody because I felt that if I did do that, it would be this weakness and I would look weird in front of my friends. So I never said anything about it. And I mean, it even creeped into when I had kids and when they were really young, I would just be hovering around them at the water park. And it didn't actually break free until I really talked to somebody, and I actually did. I went to therapy, and all of those emotions that I had built up from I think it was almost 20 years between the 2 that I just lost it because I had never unpacked it and never really talked about it, and that's the power of actually just sharing it with people. It's not about getting fixed, or it's not a magic trick, but talking about it at least brings it to the surface so that you can understand how to go about it and understand that you also have people that can relate to you because you're not alone. But it does feel like you are. I get it. I was there once. It does feel like you are on an island by yourself. But trust me, you're not. We're all going through these things on a day-to-day basis, and the best thing to do is really share it with somebody that you really trust. Again, we're not looking to fix, no one's broken, right? But we want you to heal and know how to heal. Like each and every day, you come into some of these problems or some of these issues where you don't know where to go next. I mean, to be honest, most of us can tell when our car needs attention, right? You hear a noise, there's a rumbling somewhere, there's a warning light. Like I said in the last episode, my battery light came on and my alternator was dead. We notice when something doesn't feel right, and we'll schedule an appointment because we know if we ignore that problem long enough, my car's not going to start, or, the car won't run correctly. But for some reason, when it comes to ourselves, especially men, we often do the exact opposite, right? We notice we're stressed. We're noticed we're exhausted. We notice we're frustrated. We notice we're carrying more than we usually do. And instead of paying attention to that and listening to the warning signs, we tell ourselves we'll deal with it later. We need to stop doing that because that later becomes next week or next month or next year. And before we know it, we've been carrying so many things for so many years that we should have talked about a long time ago. I think one of the most powerful questions anyone can ask is, how are you really doing? Notice the word really. I say it all the time. Sometimes I say it too much, but because that's where the honesty begins. Most people ask you how you're doing out of politeness. But when someone asks how you're really doing, they're giving you permission to be honest. And some men don't hear that question often. They're expected to solve problems. They're expected to provide or stay strong, just keep trucking and moving forward. But very few people stop and ask how they're doing underneath all of that. We're carrying so much stress, financial pressure, relationship challenges, grief, uncertainty, the fear about what's next. And because everyone is carrying something different, everyone deserves someone who cares enough to ask. I remember hearing someone say that people don't always need advice. Sometimes they just need to know that they're not carrying everything alone. Think about that. Just sitting there and listening. I'm not trying to judge anybody. I just want them to open up so they don't have to sit in that like pressure of feeling like they're alone. How many times have you felt better after simply talking something out? Not because the problem disappeared by any means, not because somebody magically fixed it. Again, that doesn't work that way. But someone just listened. Someone just cared because someone made you feel seen. That's what checking in does. It reminds us that we're not invisible. But if we're honest, a lot of men spend years feeling like their value is connected to what they do rather than who they are. They're appreciated for what they provide or what they accomplish or what they sacrifice. But sometimes they need to hear that they're valued simply because they're human beings, not machines, not superheroes, although I do feel sometimes like a superhero, but, that's just me. Or not problem solving robots, just human beings. That's why this conversation matters, because the strongest communities are built on connection. We need to reach out more to our fellow males to check in. Strongest men are not the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who understand that they don't have to struggle alone and that it's okay to talk to each other. So here's a question for everyone listening, okay? When was the last time you checked in with yourself? Not your schedule, not the kids' events, not your bank account, not your honey-do list, but Actually, you. When was the last time you sat quietly and asked yourself, how am I really doing? What are you carrying? What are you grateful for? What do I need right now? Those are powerful questions to ask yourself, and they often lead to powerful answers. And I always tell people self awareness is where growth starts. But before we can heal, we have to have the knowledge of what's hurting us. And before we grow, we have to recognize what's holding us back. And that honesty isn't weakness, it's one of the bravest things somebody can do. And as we continue into this conversation, I think it's important to talk about something that we all as men can relate to, and that's the pressure. I know every human being has some form of pressure. And I'm not talking about the kind of pressure people always see. I'm talking about the pressure that lives quietly in the background noise. Those tabs that are open up in your brain all the time. The ones that follow you to work or sit with you when you're trying to sleep. The interesting thing about pressure is that it doesn't always announce itself, right? Sometimes it shows up in frustration and anger, or maybe exhaustion, or just being overwhelmed. And a lot of men know exactly what I'm talking about. There's pressure to provide and to succeed and have all the answers. And while those responsibilities can be meaningful, they can also become incredibly heavy when you start carrying them by yourself. I think men spend years believing that if they're struggling, they need to keep it to themselves. I'm included in that. I've struggled many times off and on in my entire lifetime. And just up until now, I started actually sharing because I understood how I felt when I did that. And there's nothing wrong with being resilient, but resilience isn't the same thing as pretending. Resilience means facing the challenges and continuing to move forward, even if it's baby steps. Pretending means acting like challenges don't exist. Those are two very different things. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that carrying everything alone doesn't make you stronger, but it makes the load heavier. My shoulders got very, very heavy because I didn't share anything with anybody, and then my body shut down on me. And I know when you have these stresses and these loads that feel so heavy, you're laying awake at night and you're worrying about all this stuff, wondering how you're going to make the right decisions and providing and career goals, maybe some unexpected setbacks. I've had a lot of major setbacks for the last so many years, but at the same time, if you go back and look at these setbacks, they were actually putting me where I needed to be up until this point right now. So you have to maybe change the narrative of how you look at them. They may look like setbacks in the beginning or disappointments, but they're really aligning you with what you're trying to do. But you also have to have patience and you also have to have faith in yourself because life starts stacking weight on your shoulders little by little if you don't act on them right away. And before you know it, you're carrying far more than anyone ever realizes. And the problem isn't that life gets heavy. The problem is we convince ourselves that we can carry it alone. But the truth is, nobody was designed for that. We're created for that connection, that community to support one another. And that's why conversations like this really matter. Because somewhere out there, there's somebody listening right now, a male, who has been carrying something for a very long time. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's fear. And maybe he's spent so much time carrying that he's forgotten what it feels like to put it down. You need to put that down. You need to talk about it. That's why I want to remind every listener today that strength doesn't come from never feeling pressure. That strength comes from learning how to navigate the pressure in healthy ways and knowing when to reach out and being honest enough to say, I've got a lot on my mind lately. There's courage in that. There's wisdom in that. And there's absolutely nothing weak about that at all. The strongest people I know, the males that I know in my circle, aren't the ones who pretend life is easy. They're the ones who acknowledge when life is difficult and keep moving forward anyway. We're not hiding anything anymore. That's the real strength. One thing that I think is very important that I've noticed as I get older, and that I believe every man needs, whether he realizes it or not, is brotherhood. Not just friendships, not just people you know, but real brotherhood. The kind of people that know when you're off, right? When they can kind of feel that vibe that something's going on in your head and you need to kind of talk about it. And one of our major challenges as males is feeling that isolation. And what's interesting is that you can be surrounded by people and still feel that aloneness. You can have coworkers and family and social media followers. You can have people around you every single day and still feel like nobody really knows what's going on like inside your brain. I mean, that could be scary. I don't know if anybody wants to see what's inside my brain. I've got too many tabs open. But that's why meaningful relationships matter so much. We all need people who we can talk to honestly, who we know that will listen. People who aren't expecting perfection, who aren't keeping score, who aren't trying to fix you, they're not judging you, but just simply care. There are people out here as males who care and are looking for other people who care. Think about some of the toughest seasons you've experienced in life. I've had a lot of them. Chances are there's someone who helped you get through it. Maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a mentor, maybe it was a family member. Maybe it was someone who simply listened to you that you needed to talk. It could have been a stranger. I've had a lot of those too. I've had a lot of great conversations with people. I had no idea who they were. Sometimes the greatest gift another person can give us isn't advice, it's just their presence. I constantly tell people to be present. It's just having somebody there and knowing that somebody cares and who is willing to walk beside you while you're just trying to figure things out. Life is hard. Too many men have convinced themselves they need to handle everything alone. Somewhere along the way, many of us started believing that independence means isolation. But those aren't the same things. Being capable doesn't mean refusing support. Being strong doesn't mean carrying everything. In all honesty, my circle of friends understand the value of community and that brotherhood. We call each other brothers. Life is simply too unpredictable to go through it alone as males. We're going to have victories we want to celebrate and talk about. There will be challenges that we need help with. There will be seasons where nothing seems to make sense. You're going to go through these processes of it. It feels like everything is against you and your back is against the wall. And during all of these moments, high and low, that brotherhood really does matter. During this Men's Mental Health Month, I want to challenge every listener to strengthen one relationship. Reach out to somebody, send that text, make the call, invite them to lunch, reconnect with an old friend, start the conversation again. Because meaningful connections don't happen by accident, they happen intentionally. And often the simple act of reaching out can become the beginning of something life changing for someone. I love when somebody out of nowhere is like, hey, you want to go to lunch? Because I want to just be there for them and listen, whether there's something that we need to celebrate, or maybe there's some things that we just need to talk about that they're kind of stressed out about. Either way, because I want to highlight them wherever they're at in their life. Maybe they've gotten some growth. Maybe they've taken some setbacks. That's okay too. And then we would talk about it because, again, just trying to be present for them in all aspects of their life matters. When I went back to school, my biggest goal was trying to help men try to figure out where they were in their life, wherever we started to talk, because I didn't have that when I was younger. I'm trying to be the person that I needed to be when I was struggling with my mental health and my struggles and trying to take all this weight on. And I still continue to try to take on more weight than I should. But I've also talked my way through different situations and stress levels and kind of taken a step back and really picked me over things that were going to wear me out and just make it worse for myself in the future, right? Because while the conversation we're having right now is about where we are, it's also about where we're going. I think we're seeing something encouraging happening. More men are gradually starting to talk. I can see more men are becoming more aware of their mental health a little bit and their emotional wellness and that it matters. And more men are learning that vulnerability and that strength can exist together. But it is a process. And it's going to continue to be a process, but we have to keep talking about it. Future generations are watching us, guys. Young males are watching how we respond to challenges. My son watches all the time. We actually talk about it. We have great conversations about things that are unfolding in the presence and, all things in between. But it wasn't like that for me. So I'm jumping on that. And every time he wants to talk about something, I'm right there. These young men are watching how we handle those disappointments and how we communicate, how we treat ourselves, how we treat our spouses, how we treat them. Whether we realize it or not, we're helping shape the definition of manhood for the next generation and generations to come. And imagine how much healthier that future could be if young men grew up understanding that emotions aren't something to fear. Imagine if they learn that asking for help is normal. They learn that strength includes honesty and learning that self care isn't selfish. Imagine if they learned that mental health deserves the same attention as physical health. Those lessons could change lives. The goal isn't to create weaker men, it's to create healthier men, men who know themselves and their emotions, how to communicate, how to build strong relationships, and to support one another, men who aren't afraid to grow. That's the future I hope that we're building, that I'm building with all of these outlets. A future where men don't have to choose between strength and vulnerability. A future where conversations like this aren't rare. Let's make this normal. And while we may not change everything overnight, obviously that's not the case because we continue and continue to work on this. We can absolutely change the culture one conversation at a time. Every honest conversation matters. Every encouraging word matters. Every act of support matters. Every check-ins matter. Small actions create big change. Why not start with us? Why not start today? As I begin wrapping up today's conversation, I wanted to say thank you for all of you listening to this. Thank you for spending this time with me on this podcast. It really does mean a lot to talk about this topic. Really just trying to reach as many individual males as I possibly can because it is tough to talk about our feelings, but it also does matter. And before this day is over, I want you to think about one man in your life. Maybe it's your brother, maybe it's your best friend. Maybe it's your dad, maybe it's your son. Maybe it's the guy who's always smiling and acting like everything's okay. Reach out, send a text message, make that call, ask the question, not what's up, not how's work. Ask him how he's really doing because you never know what someone is carrying behind their smile. For this Men's Mental Health Month, let's make a commitment to one another. Let's stop assuming people are okay. Let's start checking in because that's how we're going to make a difference. One conversation, one connection, one brother at a time. Let's make it more than a calendar event. Let's make it a reminder to support one another, to speak up, and to listen. And most importantly, a reminder that none of us are meant to walk this life alone. Thank you for joining me on this episode, Check In, Brother. Remember to take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Real strength isn't found in pretending everything is okay. It's found in having the courage to be real. And as I leave you guys always, I leave you with this. Stay grounded, stay kind to yourself, and remember, strength begins with honesty. Until next time.